Hi everyone. Today we're going to be cutting out squares, half square triangles, quarter square triangles on the Cricut Maker using the rotary blade tool. So this would be using the fabric mat. This is just fabric. There's no fusible webbing on the back like steam a seam, or I can't think of the other one. It'll come to me, but you know what I mean. So when you do an applique, so if you've got lots of pieces to make or to cut out, there's nothing more accurate than this. The one thing you do want to remember is in your quilting pattern, it will say cut 23-inch squares and then cut them on the diagonal, or cut them on the diagonal in both directions. That's what this is for. If the instructions say cut 2 squares, put them on top of each other, right sides together, draw a line and stitch on each side, that's a different type of technique, and the measurements would be a little different. So just remember, in your instructions, if it calls for you to cut a square or a bunch of squares and then cut them on the diagonal for a half square, or cut them on the diagonal in both directions for a quarter square, this is the perfect solution for that, to get them perfectly cut every single time. So let's go ahead and get over to the Cricut Design Space and get started. Okay, so we're at the Cricut Design Space, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that I've picked the right machine that I'm going to use, and it's the Maker. Excuse me, I had to sneeze, sorry. So I'm going to pick the Maker, and you'll pick yours. The next thing we want to have is click on New Project. So we're going to come over to this top right and click New Project, and I was already in one, so I just replaced it. So we have our blank canvas, and what we want to do is we want to have a square, a half square triangle, and a quarter square triangle. So those are the 3 sizes that you would mainly use for quilting blocks. So we're going to come over to the left for shapes, and we want to pick the square, and we don't want the square that has the rounded corners. We want just regular square. So I'm just going to click on that. It'll bring it in. I'm going to move it over here to the center, and I'm just going to change the color, because when it goes to the mat, it would be black on a black mat. It's kind of hard to see. So we have a 2-inch one here, and we can make this any size we want. So if we come up to the top, right where the size is, we can change the width or the height. Just one, and it'll change them both. So I'm going to do 3, and I'm just going to tab. It takes me over to the next. Because we have the padlock on, it changes both height and width at the same time. So we're going to just set this block over here, because there's our square. But now we want to make a half square triangle, and we'll just make it from a square. So I can either right click on here and get a drop down menu, or I can come over to the right into the layers section, and it says duplicate, and make a duplicate. And I'm just going to bring it over. I'm going to put it over in the center first, because we're going to work on it. I'm going to make it a different color, just so we can, have each one its own color. So let's make this orange, I guess. It doesn't matter. So that's a little bright. Let's go a little lighter orange. And the next thing we need to have is we need to have a diagonal line coming from one corner down to the opposite corner. And you can go left to right, right to left, or left to right. Whichever one you want, makes no difference. So I'm going to go top right to bottom left. So we need to get a line, because there's no tool here to just draw a line. So we're going to go back to shapes. And if we look up at the very top, you see where my cursor is, there's a line. And we're going to take that line, and it'll take a second to bring it in. I'm going to move it over here. And if you look over on the right where the layers are, it's a score line, which means if you're gonna cut with it, it would make dash line cuts, and we want just a straight line, a straight cut line. So we're going to come back up to where the operations is, and it says score. We're going to open that up, and we're going to pick cut, basic cut. So it makes an actual basic cut. And you can see it says basic cut where the score is. Now we need to turn the line on the angle. So we can either turn it this way. Oh, I'm going to get it back straight, which can be a little hard to get exact. Or we can come up to the top where the rotate is, hold a finger on the shift key. I'm sorry, we can come in and put 45 in here. Can't remember, is it 40? Yeah, 45. Or holding on to the highlighting the line again, hold your shift key down, and then turn, and you see how it goes in increments instead of just kind of loosey-goosey. So the next thing we need to do is put this line over at the beginning of that corner. But let's zoom in a little more. So I'm going to go to the bottom left, and I'm just going to hit the 100% and just make it big enough so I can see it. So you can make yours as big as you need to. Now, the other thing we need to pay attention to is if you go up to the top of the line ends just below where the X and the little circle turner that we used for the rotating. Those are the tools that are above the line. So don't think that the line is like at the top here. It's really right there. You can easily see it when you have it on your screen. So I just want to get it into that corner, and then I want to make it longer until it goes to the other corner. Oh, I got to go a little more. And when you cut yours the first time, you're going to cut just one. If it doesn't cut right to the edge, you can come in and adjust that. So generally, this number here, I've got 4.216. I want to say it was 4.24. Oh, well, I don't know where all that came from. Okay, let's do that again. That was kind of strange. So I'm going to come up to the top, and I want to go to 4.25. And I'm just going to hit enter. And that should make my line. See, I think it's a little long. I can see down the bottom right here. So I'm going to go back and just come up to the top and use my arrow down. And let's try 4.22 and hit enter. I think that's about right. So what we're going to do, we want to make sure this is in those corners. So if we just click and drag and select them both, and we know we have them both, if we come over to the right, and we can see how these are gray and this one's lighter. So I know we've got these two selected, and that's the square and the line. And we're going to come over to the top, and we're going to go to a line, and we want to center horizontally. Then we want to come back up to a line again, center vertically, and now that line is right where it needs to be. If you need to look closer, you can come down to the bottom left again, and just what I would do is make sure I'm not highlighted on it, because you don't want that highlight box to be part of it. And I can see it looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to come back to regular 100%. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure these two pieces stay together. So if I highlight them, and you don't have to go across the whole shape, but you can. but you see they're highlighted again. And right up here is group, and I'm just going to group them. So now if I move it around, they're going to stay together. The next thing I want to do, oh, no, I'm going to wait. I need another one of these to, because I was going to show you how to get it ready for cutting, but we need one more. So we're going to duplicate this one. So we're going to go back over to the top right and click on duplicate. Now we have another one. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of that. And I don't know, let's make it purple, I guess. Okay, so now I want to come back to this orange one. I want to highlight it again, and I want to come down to the bottom right where it says attach and attach them. And what that means is it is going to, when we send it to make it, that line will stay right where it is rather than be a line all by itself. So now we have our purple fella here, and we need a line, because now this is a half square triangle. In order to be a quarter square triangle, we have to have another line going in the opposite direction so it looks like an X. So I'm going to come click off of it. I'm going to come over, and I'm just going to highlight on the basic cut, which is just the line. I'm going to come up to the top and duplicate that. And I'm automatically going to go and let's see, I've highlighted on it, so I'm going to turn it the other way. So I'm going to hold my shift key down, and I'm going to turn it with my mouse, and you see how it goes in increments. So now I know that's the other 45, or it's 315. I need to, again, center this one, so I'm just going to highlight everyone. And I'm going to come up and go to the alignment again. I'm going to do center horizontal, go back into the alignment, center vertical, and now the lines are lined up. And I've got one line up the top in my layers, and the other two are down the bottom. So I'm going to click and drag it down. Oh, I'll make sure it's in the right place. And I'm going to put the two lines, see if I can get, oh, I'll move the square. Oh, they're grouped. I've got to ungroup it. So I'm going to click on the group. I'm going to come up to the top and ungroup it. So I want to move the lines so they're after the square. And we'll double check when we cut. But what we really would prefer is to have the diagonal lines. Oh, did I lose my diagonal line? Oh, there it is. Okay, when I move these together, see how I can't see them anymore? And that's because I moved the square part of it. So if we click on the square part, and we want to do, I'm going to right click and go and click on send to back. But see how it moves it down? So all I want to do is just move it above the blue. Excuse me. So that I can have the three together. I'm going to click on the first line, hold my control key down, click on the second line, click on the square, and come up and group them. Now, what I was going to say was, and when I worked in my brother's scan and cut, if the diagonal line cut after the square, it kind of, when it did the diagonal line, it kind of lifted it. So I'm trying to be aware of that. But I have to say I have cut a bunch of these half squares, quarter squares with my Maker with the rotary cutter, and it didn't seem to matter. So we don't have to worry about that. But I know some of the people, have both machines, and I'm doing a video on the scan and cut where I specifically say to move the line, and it allows you to move it and keep it still visually on top. So I just wanted to address that in case you have watched both videos, the difference. So now I'm going to put this guy right up next to the other three. And I've got to make sure I do that same attach at the bottom right. So I'm going to come down to attach, and now they're attached. So that when I send it to make it, and I'm just going to show you, each one is the line is staying with the square. So I'm just going to cancel that. Now, you want to save these because you can make these any size you want. So if I take this quarter square and highlight it, and I come up and I want to make it 5 inches, I'm just typing the 5 up the top and tab. Do you see the lines go right along with the square and stay the size they need to be? So you can make this any size you want. I'm just going to undo that. You can make these any size you want, small, bigger, whatever size you need. If you need them an odd size, you can, like 3 7/8 or 3 3/4. You can do that. So you want to have your base set. So we want to make sure we save these. So we're going to come up to the save. So I'm on the top right on save. And you see where it says new collection right here. I made a collection and I called it quilting right here. So if you don't have a collection for quilting, that just means anything you have to do with quilting you can put inside this folder, so you don't have a million individual projects here. So you would click on new collection and type in quilting, and then it would automatically put it in. In this case, I'm going to check mark quilting and see how I brought it up here. And I'm going to call it, let's see, I'm going to call it half square. And you don't want to use punctuation like periods and commas. So I'm just going to put a dash and put quarter square, because I know there's going to be a square there, and if there's not, I can easily make one. But the half square and the quarter square are the ones you're going to be looking for, and we just hit save. Okay, and now you have them to use whenever you want. Also, I'm gonna take you out to the excuse me, images. I think it's under images, and we're gonna type in. I'm gonna type in quarter square. Quarter square. Oh, let me move my mouse out of the way. Triangle, and hit the search, and you get a lot of these. So what I want to say about these particular half squares is it's only half the square. So if you wanted to cut a square into 2 halves, if you took, for example, this 5-inch one, and you had one here and one here, it would cut that center line 2 times. And after it cut the first time, it's cutting the fabric. The second time it's cutting just your mat. So you don't want to use those. But you can come down to, like, for example, this one. You don't want these bigger ones if you just need 1 or 2, because these don't divide out to get 1. They stay just like they are. So if you need that many, that works fine. But and the reason I'm showing you this, and I showed you how to do it yourself, because these are subscribed shapes. So if you don't have the subscription for Cricut, excuse me, Access, or I'm not sure what it's called, then the way we did it to begin with works for everybody. But if you do have this and you want to quickly grab one of these, I'm going to grab this blue one. I'm going to add it to the canvas, and it comes in huge, 32 inches. So I'm just going to come up the top, and I'm just going to make it 10 inches and hit the tab. I'm just going to move it over here. Now it's grouped, so I have to ungroup it. I'm going to come up to the top right and ungroup. So you see how you have this one triangle. If I made a copy of it and put another one here, this is how it would cut, and then it would cut this one, as I was saying, and cut again in the same space, which would be directly onto your mat. We don't want that. So we're just going to delete that one. These two are together no matter what. We can delete that one. So now you have the half square that you can make whatever size you want. So if I wanted to make this 4 inches, it's fine. They don't have a quarter square one. So if you wanted to use this one, then you draw a line going in the other direction. I wanted to show you this because it's cut a little different. So and I'll show you when we cut what it looks like. You see how it's got that little square in the corner? So it's cutting off the dog ears or the little points. And that's perfectly fine. It's a little easier to sew that way, but either way is fine. That's not like a mistake or anything. And like I said, I'll show you a sample of it when we cut the other shapes. So I wanted you to see that. I'm just going to delete it. And we're going to cut a half square and a quarter square. So I'm just going to delete the square, because remember we have it saved with all 3 of them. So you can pick one, you can make 10 of this and 5 of that, or whatever you want to do, and you can make them so they're on, they'll be on separate mats, but I'm going to show you how to put these onto one mat, because we're going to use 2 pieces of fabric on one mat. So let's go ahead over to make it. And you can see there's mat 1, there's mat 2. So I'm at mat 2. I'm going to come up to this corner, this left corner where the 3 dots are. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to move object. The only place I can move it to is the first mat. So I'm going to click on that. It gives me a little check mark. And now it's moved it. It moved it right on top of the other one. And it moved it. So I'm going to just move it over. So when we look at the fabric on my mat, I made my fabric 1 inch down and 1 inch over. So here's the 1 inch and 1 inch. So I moved over a little bit, and I only need to go to 4, and I have fabric, I think, until 6. I'm going to have to double check now because I had to re-record this. So part of this I'll have to splice into the other. So on my mat, I have a piece of fabric here, and I have another piece, different color, over here. And so if I had another one down here, another one there, I just have to count the squares on my mat because they were the exact same thing as here, and move the cut file to where it where the fabric is. And again, I usually put my fabric along the 1 inch lines, and then I just move my shape a little in from that edge because I don't want to cut right on the edge. I'd be cutting nothing. Okay, so you just want to come in a little bit. So let me see if I can switch over and get the actual part where I show you the fabrics. So just hold on 1 second. So before we get started with our cutting and showing how to do the half square triangles, we're going to make sure our fabric is properly prepared. And it doesn't matter if you're on the Cricut or you're on the Brother Scan and Cut, or you're using, for example, like the Crafter's Companion Gemini. You want to make sure your fabric is well pressed, and also that you use starch, or I use Best Press. Best Press doesn't draw blood. Yeah, we don't want it to draw blood. Doesn't draw bugs, and it doesn't flake. So I use that, and you can check the links below for the items I recommend in my sewing and cutting and so forth. So we want to make sure we do that. And when you press, make sure when you spray some on, you iron it until it's dry. So if you iron it and you pick it up and you can feel it's still damp, you haven't activated the starch or the best press. Iron it till it's dry, and then turn it to the other side and iron it until it's dry. And that way it'll have a little more body to it, and it'll just cut that much smoother. Okay, so I'm going to cut the half square from this one and the quarter square from this one. Now, normally, when you have half squares and quarter squares, half your square, let me get the little sample here. Half your square would be half your square would be one color and your other half would be another. And on the quarter square, you might have 2 of one color and 2 of another. So I think I showed it at the beginning, but just as a little reminder. And I think I got one just a little to get away from me. So generally you might have something that looks like that, or these 4 could be all different. So, so let's do this. I'm going to show you on the mat how to put them both. Well, no, we'll just stay with how we're doing because I don't want to get you confused. So we're going to cut 2 the same color this size and 4 another color, but all the same for this in another size. And you would, where I have the 2 pieces of fabric, geez, I'm trying to decide which would be better to show you. Yes, let me show you as it is with all one color. These are one color and all these are another color, because it's something that I want you to be able to see if you come across doing it this way. So if we look at the mat, I'm working from the inch side at the top. The other side is centimeters because it's easier for you to see it. So I moved my square over 1 inch. So I have 1 inch grid to the right, to the left, and 1 inch across the top. And then the second color is the same 1 inch across the top. And well, let's see, let me do this a little easier. And I am using my roller. Let's see if you can make sure I put that down. And I'll also say that if you have a piece of fabric on here that's covering a lot, but it's longer and hangs off the bottom, it's fine. You don't need to cut it to fit the mat. It needs to not go over on the sides, but coming down the bottom is fine to have extra. So I'm just going to set that right there. Make sure I got that all set. And let's go back to the software screen. Okay, so you can see I have 2 mats. So I'm going to click on this green one because Cricut separates the mat by colors. So if I take the second mat and I come up to the where the half square is, and there's 3 little dots on the left, and I'm going to put Move Object, and I'm going to put it onto the yellow mat and hit Confirm. So now it came out on top of the other one. So remember, I'm 1 inch over and 1 inch down. So you can see I'm just inside that 1 inch and just under that 1 inch, but I want to make sure my fabric goes over to 6, so I got plenty of room. And this one starts at 7, so I'm going to come just inside the 7. And it goes to a little after 10, and my fabric goes past 11, so I have plenty. Now, the second mat is there, but there's nothing on it. It won't cut anything But I believe when we go to the next screen, that green mat will disappear. So if I had 4 mats and I had 4 fabrics, I could put them all on doing this exactly. I'm going to hit continue. And you see on the left now that other mat's gone. I'm going to use cotton. Cotton bonded is if you put a fusible web on the back of your fabric. We're not doing that because we're sewing them as actual quilt blocks. If you don't have cotton, you would just browse all materials. And we're going to type in cotton. Search. And the cotton's here. Now you see how I have this star here? So that means that I want it on my page where I was to begin with, so I don't have to go looking for it. So if I wanted to have, light cotton, 3 layers, medium cotton. So some of these you might have to try. Just remember that bonded means that you have a fusible web, steamer seam, I can't remember the heat and bond, anything like that, you would use those. So you see if I highlight one, if you look over, see how you can see the star there? So if I wanted that one on my little, I call it the menu, I would just select that. And then it would be right along here with the ones I use the most. So I'm going to pick cotton. Okay, now it wants me to load my mat. So I'm going to switch back over to the machine so you can see that. Whoop, lost my mouse there for a minute. Here we go. My light is blinking. Okay. And now my little Cricut C is blinking. And remember, I have the rotary cutting tool in. I'm looking at it. I'm having a panic because it looked like I went too far with my fabric, but let's just see. So before I unload it, I check to see if everything cut, because if I need to recut, I can do that. But and it'll come out in the same place. But if I unload it and load it again, it might not come out in the same place. So I did cut that pretty close to the edge, but it made it. And so I'm going to unload. And remove that stuff out of the way. So there's my 2 half squares. So if I had another one, I think I got some practice ones here. That's how that would work out. But let me move these down a bit. This is the quarter squares. And what you want to remember when you're working with quarter squares, that the long side is on the outside. So they don't go this way like the other ones do. Okay, you just have to remember that, because this long side won't stretch. That's why it's cut the way it is. This one's not the right size, but that'll give you a better idea. So let me Let me take them off and get my little mat. And so that would be the half square triangle, so it would be this way. And then this is the quarter square. It's bigger. I'm just gonna, well, let's see if I have something smaller. It's not quite the same size, but it'll at least give you an idea of how it's supposed to look. So it would be like that, except they would all be the same size. Okay? So in this case, when you sew them together, you're just flipping these over and doing a 1/4 inch press and open. On these, you would flip this way, sew across, open it, and you want to put, so when you sew these two together, press the seam to the blue. When you sew these together, press the seam to the blue. So when you put them together to sew this long seam here, one seam is going this to my left or down. This one is going up, and they'll work together better. I have some YouTube videos showing the ironing and the process of all that. So there we go. Now, remember I told you that if you use the, I'm trying to find the half square triangles that were in the, here we go, that were in the design space. Can you see the little end? So normally it would be pointed. Move this a little bit. Oh, my hand looks red in the thing. It's really not. So see how this is pointed and this one is not. Oh, let's keep to the light as best we can there. And you see that? See, this one's pointed. That's not. And it's just just makes it easier to put them together or to sew them. So there we have it. So if you make sure when you make your square, your half square triangle and your 1/4 square triangle, be sure to save your file. So then you've only drawn it once. You can make it any size you want. You can make them all different sizes and send them all one big piece of fabric, different pieces of fabric, different colors of fabric, not different types of fabric. Sometimes if you have one that's thinner and one's thicker, depending on the difference, it might need a difference in, like we picked cotton and there was a medium cotton. So just try one out before you do a whole bunch. So have a good time cutting out all your half squares and 1/4 squares, because you know what? They all come out the same size when they're cut. See you next time. Thanks for stopping by.